Will you pray with me, please? Loving God, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of each and every one of our hearts be pleasing to you. Amen. Deuteronomy. We don't often hear from the book of Deuteronomy, do we? But there's some pretty amazing things in the book of Deuteronomy, like this text. Imagine that you are Moses and you have been leading this lost and motley crew of people through the desert for what seems like forever. You are now old and you've been pretty much through some pretty rough times with the people, and you've been through some pretty wonderful times with the people as well. And now you can see the promised land. It's just across the River Jordan. But God has told you that you will not be leading the people, that Joshua will lead the people into the promised land. Leadership must change hands. You love these people. You've learned, you've grown with them, you've traveled with them for years, and now this is your last chance to pass on to them everything that you've learned, what you think is really important in life. Our reading today is that speech, that last speech that Moses is going to make, and he is passionate. That last speech he will make to the people is his last chance to teach them what he wants them to know and what he has learned to be the most important things in life. So when I was thinking about this moment for Moses, I thought about our son, Christopher. Christopher's our youngest son, and he is probably one of the most introverted people I've ever met in my life. So this was his last summer home before going off to college. And he was pretty anxious, but he didn't let us know right off the bat until it was time to find that job for the summer. He came to us with a proposal. That's the way Christopher does things, in a proposal. And he says, I spent last summer, working in a grocery store. Please, don't make me do that again. It's hard enough getting ready to go to college. I'm anxious enough about it without having to be social for 8 hours a day. So Bill and I thought about it, and we decided that there was a lot of things that we hadn't taught Christopher how to do. So we thought about it, and we decided that we were going to pay him to stay home and take care of all the things that we wanted him to learn. So I started a list, and the list got longer and longer. So he ended up managing the food budget, doing the shopping, planning the meals, cooking at least 3 meals a week. He ended up refinishing furniture, cleaning the house, fixing the fence, washing the windows, painting, whatever we had on our list. And I was panicked that it still wasn't everything he needed to know. So that was for Christopher, a very stressful time. And he did a great job. Now, my kids went off to college, and I was doing substance abuse prevention. Not something you want your mother doing when you're going off to college. So I knew more about substance abuse and illegal drugs than they wanted their mother to know. I was working with colleges, and I knew the statistics about students visiting the emergency room on weekends. I knew the statistics about overdoses and dropouts. So again, you can feel my panic as a parent. I was a little desperate, wanting my kids to hear what I had to say. In my world, I wanted them to obey my warnings. They had 2 choices in my eyes. Choose life and all that life has to offer you, or death and drugs. I imagine that that's kind of the way Moses felt. Panicked, a little desperate. The people are going across to the promised land without him. They didn't always demonstrate that they would follow the rules and the laws that God had set before them. So Moses knew what they needed to do, and he wanted desperately for them to hear his message. The Torah was pretty clear about the ordinances and the decrees and the commandments that the people were to follow. And those ordinances and laws were good for all people, not just a few. Following the laws meant that the people would worship God, one God, Yahweh. That they would treat others, especially the weak and the slave, with justice and fairness. They should honor their parents, respect their neighbors, love one another, care for the land and the natural order of things. And there is more. And they had been taught that to live in the promised land according to the laws of the Torah would create the possibility for good and blessed life. Moses could see, looking back, that life was the best for people when they were trying to please God. On that riverbank so long ago, Moses had to let go, and he wanted people to hear what he had to say, because he wasn't going to be there with them in the promised land. Moses wanted to be sure that they understood the gravity of the choices that they were going to be making in the future. He had seen the people thrive and be filled with joy and the abundance when they worked together, when they shared and when they cared for one another. And he had also witnessed what had happened when they chose to be selfish, to be jealous of one another. And he knew how miserable life was for them when they lived like that. Choose life, Moses cries out. Choose life. The Message interpretation says it this way, and I quote, "And I command you today, love God. Love your God. Walk in his ways, keep his commandments, regulations, and rules so that you will live. Really live. Live exuberantly, blessed by God, your God, in the land that you are about to enter and possess." Unquote. The choices in this reading are pretty clear. Choose life or choose death. Follow the laws that God has laid before us, because I know that life will be so much better if you do, Moses cried. If you ignore God's laws, you will be missing out on so much joy, so much love, and the gift of unity. If you don't choose life, you choose death. Moses is talking to us as well this day. Choose life. Do the best you can to follow God's commandments and laws. Choose life. Tell your children and your grandchildren to choose life, to follow God's teachings. Moses knew it, and so do we. That life is so much better when we follow God's ways. Today, decide to choose life. Amen.